I am the most obscure concubine in the household of Marquis Pingyang. Outwardly, I am cautious and submissive. I dutifully serve my disdainful in-laws and endure the endless provocations of the principal wife. Inwardly, I carefully ingratiate myself. Even the cold-hearted Marquis of Pingyang had a few moments of distraction on my bed. Everyone said I was a good concubine, and the greatest fortune in my life was being chosen by the Marquis of Pingyang and giving birth to a promising son. I lived peacefully like this until my 70s. Logically, someone like me didn't need to be reborn. I was mediocre and dull-witted. Though I tread on thin ice all my life, my obedience and forbearance earned me society's approval. But as soon as I opened my eyes, I was back at the tavern where I first met Marquis Pingyang. My sisters were just inviting me to serve the distinguished guests. I fell silent. In the end, I shook my head. I don't want to go. In the hall, Marquis Pingyang, who had intended to take me under his wing once again, waited in vain for his old acquaintance to appear. He paused his wine cup, taken aback for a moment. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. The flower hall was bustling, filled with the music of strings and pipes. The melodies, accompanied by the singing and laughter of beauties, drifted into the empty little room. I was the only one sitting before the bronze mirror, tidying up the scattered dresses of my sisters who had left in a hurry, wiping away the traces of rouge and powder left on the table. As I closed the dressing case, my heart was still buzzing with anxiety. I had to admit, I was a little afraid. In my past life, people often said that the Pingyang Marquis's residence was difficult to enter, and even harder to leave. It was hard to enter because the Marquis of Pingyang, Tan Chu, was exceptionally handsome, talented in both literature and martial arts, yet also had a cleanliness obsession and was very picky. It was difficult to survive because the back courtyard of the Marquis's mansion was filled with endless schemes and intrigues. Over the years, some died, some fell ill, and others lost favor. The one who lived to the end among the concubines was me. At that time, the public was quite fascinated by this story. There were even some subtly suggestive storybooks written, depicting the tragic love affairs between illegitimate daughters, singing girls, and nobles or generals. Each story has its own merits, but the one constant is that the female protagonist is hopelessly in love with the man. Even if despised by his parents or insulted by his wife, she would silently endure it all, unwilling to utter a word that might trouble the one she loves. But they were all mistaken. I do not love Lord Pingyang in the slightest. I am simply afraid of him. With my plain looks and humble background, I had to exhaust every ounce of effort to please him, just to survive. Now, I have been reborn back to this day of our first meeting. I should have gone with the other sisters to play music and sing for those high officials, then been casually chosen by the drunken Tan Chu and taken into his mansion, to continue enjoying that blessing that others envied. But after a moment of silence, I still shook my head. This blessing, to have enjoyed it for a lifetime is enough. The dowry chest was gently closed. Outside the window, the music gradually softened. The banquet of the nobles was nearing its end. No one ever came to call me over. I suppose, in this life, Tan Chu has made a different choice. To him, I was indeed nothing more than a dispensable accessory. I let out a soft sigh, and the last trace of unease in my heart vanished. Chin Chu, in this life, our fate ends here. Farewell to so-called wealth and honor. Yet my heart feels unexpectedly lighter. Coincidentally, the newly appointed Qin player pushed the door open. Yi Jianhe saw me and spoke gently. Xiaoman, are you feeling unwell? I brought you some warm wine, a reward from the noble. I smiled and said thank you. For the next 2 days, everything remained the same. The most beautiful songstress, Qingyu, had been looking very pale ever since she returned from the banquet. Everyone else also seemed somewhat downcast. Though I didn't understand, I didn't feel it was right to ask further. A close sister of mine whispered to me privately that Qingyu is quite aloof and thought she was sure to enter the Marquis's estate this time. But someone who disliked her secretly splashed her red silk skirt with dirt. If you hadn't backed out at the last moment and lent her your skirt, she wouldn't have been able to go at all. She sighed and said, in the end, it would have been better if she hadn't gone. The Marquis didn't even glance at her from start to finish. TSK. It was utterly humiliating for her. Hearing this, I felt a heavy heart. I knew Qingyu wanted to go, and in this lifetime, I didn't want to compete with anyone for such a title, so I gave it to her. She was beautiful, clever, and determined to marry into a wealthy and powerful family. I always thought someone like her would surely have a better life than I did back then. I never expected that she wouldn't get what she wished for. Who did the Marquis of Pingyang choose? I asked casually. None of them. I was stunned for a moment, standing in the center of the flower hall. My body suddenly stiffened, a cold wind blew in, and a suspicion arose. I felt cold sweat seeping from every pore. In my confused state of mind, my gaze inadvertently caught sight of Yi Jianhe, the Qin player I was on good terms with. I forced a smile to bid farewell to my sisters, wiped the cold sweat from my temples with a handkerchief, and walked toward Yi Jianhe. It was as if I were rushing toward a lifeline. I don't know, but at that day's banquet, Tan Chu's presence was even more striking than in his previous life. This was the prime of his youth, a time when he was full of vigor and ambition. Yet, unlike his peers whose eyes lingered entirely on beautiful women, Tan Chu wore a smile on his lips. But his eyes were even colder, so mature it felt abrupt, as if he had already spent half a lifetime navigating the official circles, amidst the clinking of wine cups. Someone subtly brought up the current struggle for the position of crown prince. The third prince has reached the age of adulthood, yet he has not been sent to his fiefdom. Although the 11th prince is young, he is intelligent, and as the son of the imperial consort, he enjoys the emperor's utmost favor. Now, it is clear to everyone that the emperor intends to make the imperial consort the new empress. If this move is made, factional strife will inevitably arise, and by then, even those who wish to remain neutral and protect themselves will become the target of public criticism. The matter of appointing a crown prince is extremely sensitive, but given the current turbulent times and the concerns of the officials, it has to be discussed. Tan Chu only smiled without speaking, and whenever someone tried to sound him out, he skillfully evaded the topic. Among all those present, only he knew that the one who would ultimately become emperor was neither the third prince nor the 11th prince. He pondered the thoughts of those present and calculated his own path. In his previous life, unaware of the political situation, he had no choice but to play it safe, which ultimately led to the new emperor's ascension. Although he wasn't punished, his path to further promotion was cut off. In this life, Tan Chu has only one goal: to rise to the highest rank, thriving and flourishing. Standing above all but one, he idly traced the rim of his cup, feeling utterly bored. Once the important matters were clarified, the banquet lost its appeal. Qin Chu had long passed the age of appreciating flowers and admiring the moon. A youthful exterior concealed a heart weathered by the trials of life. He glanced indifferently at the group of singing girls. Each so young they could have been half his age, their shallow gazes unable to conceal even the slightest of hidden thoughts. A delicate cry rang out as Qin Chu's sleeve was soaked with wine. It was my carelessness. My lord, please punish me. Qin Chu looked at the woman bowing to him and suddenly paused in wiping his sleeve. No wonder he had felt as if he had forgotten something. Tan Chu suddenly looked up, frowning as he scanned all the singing girls in the hall wearing red silk skirts. Yet not a single one was like that woman, who huddled meekly in the corner like a quail. That concubine was a singing girl he had casually brought back to the mansion in his previous life. At first, he paid her no mind, but later, noticing she neither fussed nor acted out, even showing a bit of charm, Tan Chu began to take a little more interest in her. Now, though he had been reborn, his heart had long grown old. He had lost the desire for romantic dalliances and had no fondness for women bickering and fighting over him. It would be quite nice to have a stable and virtuous concubine settled in the residence. Tan Chu pondered for a moment and summoned the brothel owner. Are all the singing girls of your establishment here? The owner replied, only one is unfortunately ill today. I feared she might offend your noble ears, so I didn't bring her over. The owner added with an ingratiating smile. But it's no matter, she isn't particularly beautiful, nor does she sing very well. When it comes to true beauty, the Qingyu girl by your side is far more outstanding. Qin Chu waved his hand. Asking for someone himself would be a bit beneath his dignity if he were to request a woman whom others considered mediocre, especially in front of his colleagues. It would be downright embarrassing. He thought for a moment and said softly, I prefer songs that are complete and harmonious. In 3 days, I happen to be hosting a banquet at my residence. Gather everyone together and bring them along to liven things up. 3 days later, Pingyang Marquis Estate. Tan Chu saw the brothel owner and was reminded of this matter again. It is indeed a bit troublesome to take a concubine before even marrying a wife. That day, he had drunk a bit too much and was a bit impatient. Thinking back on it now, Tan Chu felt it would have been better to first ask the brothel owner to give her a proper background. Perhaps as a daughter from some family, and then take her as a concubine. It would look better on the surface, and she would suffer less in the future. Tan Chu was pondering which family to ask for help in making things official, when he heard the workshop owner apologetically say, My lord, I truly apologize. But we're still one person short this time. What, is she still not recovered from her illness? The workshop owner sighed and said, although she has recovered. The young lady is unable to come, knowing your lordship's preference for cleanliness. I dare not deceive you, the young lady has already been promised to someone else. This was so unexpected that Tan Chu didn't even understand at first. What did you say? Promised to whom? The monk had no choice but to grit his teeth and force himself to say, my lord, Miss Xiaoman has married a Qin player. They just held the ceremony last night. Ah, that girl really has no luck. Tan Chu's face remained expressionless, but his eyelids suddenly twitched violently. The Prince of Qi's mansion, Yi Jianhe, and I, carrying various household items and musical instruments, squeezed through the small side door of the corner room. Yi Jianhe lowered his voice. Xiaoman, can we really make it big this time? You must bet on the right horse. If you're wrong, we'll have no more chances. I nodded. Don't worry. Yi Jianhe wanted to say more but held back. I knew that even the common folk outside the court believed the struggle for the crown prince would inevitably be between the third prince and the 11th prince. The deposed crown prince of Qi is undoubtedly a discarded piece on the chessboard now. Yi Jianhe gritted his teeth. Forget it, now that we're married. We share the same breath as husband and wife. If you say he can succeed, then he will succeed. I'll trust your judgment. I nodded. My marriage to Yi Jianhe was not born of love at first sight, but rather a more practical consideration. Both Yi Jianhe and I are lowly entertainers, and as we travel from place to place, we inevitably face some frivolous teasing. Having a family already can serve as an excuse to fend off such advances. Although it's not always useful, if I encounter some arrogant and shameless children of officials, it would naturally be like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. But it's still good to avoid a little trouble. Therefore, when I made this proposal, Yi Jianhe agreed readily and without hesitation. He didn't know that, for me, marriage had another purpose. I suspect that Tan Chu has also been reborn. If my guess is correct, then I must prepare in advance. Perhaps I'm being overly cautious, or even too confident in myself. Maybe he doesn't even remember me at all. Qin Xuzhen has been reborn. What matters most to him now should be his power and wealth. He ought to have long forgotten about me, only seeking out more beautiful women. How could he still be holding a grudge against me? Not to mention, now that I'm married, it should completely cut off any lingering thoughts he might have. I breathed a soft sigh of relief, feeling that the great trouble had been resolved. I changed into the dance partner's silk skirt and, chatting and laughing with Yi Jianhe, we arrived at the flower hall. I saw a certain person at the banquet. But I couldn't help but freeze in surprise. The woman was seated near the front, her eyes lowered as she sipped her tea. The women around her all gathered, their expressions relaxed, yet every gesture revealed a cautiousness toward her. I lowered my head, my hands aching with a piercing phantom pain, just like that sharp, stabbing pain from the silver needle piercing my finger in the depths of winter. Do you know where you belong, wretch? Scornful words, paired with those icy eyes. Zhao Qinan, the future mistress of Pingyang Marquis Manor. Every time I recall it, it torments me unbearably. I couldn't help but tremble at the sight of that woman. Yi Jianhe noticed my discomfort. In a crowd, he inevitably had to show some marital affection, so he gently took my arm and asked, Xiaoman, are you cold? What a beautiful spring scene. A voice, smiling yet icy cold, suddenly rang out. A similarly cold fan handle slanted downward, tapping the back of Yi Jianhe's hand. Yi Jianhe let go. Turning around, I saw that the person was actually Qin Chu. Why is he here? I had no time to compose my expression and instinctively stepped back as if avoiding a ghost. Yi Jianhe had seen Tan Chu at the previous banquet and knew he was a man of high status. He quickly stepped in front of me and bowed. Greetings, Marquis. My wife is timid and easily frightened. If she has offended you, I beg your forgiveness on her behalf. I also knelt beside Yi Jianhe. I did not know that, from Tan Chu's lofty perspective, the two of us bowing side by side, dressed in matching blue and red robes, looked as though we were holding our wedding ceremony right under his eyes, shamelessly flaunting it. Tan Chu smiled warmly and nodded repeatedly, yet the fingers holding the fan were clenched so tightly that the knuckles had turned white without him noticing. It's fine. The innkeeper told me that the two of you have just married. How could I possibly wish to spoil your newlywed bliss? Go on. I breathed a sigh of relief, though it was unclear why Tan Chu had suddenly spoken up. It was probably just a coincidence. After all, he came to this banquet probably for someone else. For example, his former wife in his past life, Zhao Qinan. Yi Jianhe helped me up and brushed the dust off my knees. I thanked him in a low voice. leaning in close to whisper the various details of the upcoming performance, but I always feel as if the back of my neck is being brushed by gusts of chilly wind. Instinctively turning around, I was terrified. Qin Chu actually hadn't left, he was still standing firmly in place, eyes fixed on me, the pupils dark and profound. He mouthed 2 words silently, Ren Yong. My chest ached sharply, and I froze abruptly. Qin Chu looked at me, who had finally been exposed and was no longer pretending to be a stranger, and grinned. Ren Yong is the name of our child. He was an exceptionally outstanding eldest son, precocious and mature, excelling in both literary and martial arts, and at the age of 19, he achieved the 3rd highest rank in the imperial examinations. That is why Tan Chu broke with the old tradition, declaring that the eldest son of a concubine should also be considered the eldest son. The person he ultimately designated to inherit the title was Tan Renyong. I stared at Tan Chu, his eyes were cold, yet his expression was one of unwavering determination. It seemed to be telling me that I could pretend to be a stranger, feign indifference, or even happily marry a man with no prospects. But Ren Yong, this child, I must give him. Tan Chu doesn't care about me. What he cares about is that absolutely outstanding heir. His fingers tapped the jade pendant at his waist, his eyes shifting slightly beneath thin eyelids as his gaze fell upon the unsuspecting Yi Jianhe. His threatening tone was both contemptuous and arrogant. Qin Chu had now completely torn off the mask. He didn't even bother to pretend anymore. The fact that he could mention Ren Yong's name meant he was determined to entangle himself with me. What should I do now? Ren Yong, Qin Ren Yong. Thinking of this name, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. My child. I had thought he would be my only support in the Marquis's household, but after I endured all kinds of hardships for him, went to great lengths to please Tan Chu, and supported him in achieving success in the imperial examinations, I finally realized that once he no longer needed me, my existence became a burden. I still remember, when I grew old, the emperor at that time said that although I was a concubine, I had raised a meritorious official for the court throughout my life, and I deserved to be honored as a titled lady. But Ren Yong refused. She already has the good reputation of a virtuous concubine. Why should she covet the special honor of a principal wife? Only then did I understand that he cared deeply about the distinction between the legitimate wife and the concubine. Ren Yong would be more than happy for everyone to mistake him as the legitimate son, so why would he be willing to shower me with rewards? At this thought, my heart turned cold. In this lifetime, I will never give birth to him again. If he wants to be a legitimate son, then let's see if he can be born from Zhao Qinan's womb. I refused to dwell on it further, pouring all my energy into the performance. The dance came to an end. A few scattered claps echoed from the audience. Someone chuckled softly and whispered, "The dance of the common folk is nothing but an eyesore." I didn't lift my eyes. After speaking, Zhao Qinan turned to the side. "Lord Marquis, what do you think?" The drinker's heart is not in the cup. Zhao Qinan was not one to bother with a mere dancing girl. She cares about Tan Chu, and she minds the few extra words he just said to me. Whatever Zhao Qinan desires, she must have it. If there is the slightest flaw, she will go to great lengths to set up an inescapable trap. I know her all too well. That's why, before the performance, I deliberately let it slip in front of Zhao Qinan that I had just run into Tan Chu. Sure enough, she began to close in step by step. I thought Tan Chu would probably be pleased to see this situation unfold. One a noble lady from a prestigious family, the other an ambitious marquis. They were a perfect match. I wished them a swift marriage, so as not to trouble others any further. Qin Chu drank his wine, setting the cup down gently on the table. He actually said nothing. I couldn't help but be taken aback. "Lord Marquis, Miss Zhao, please be cautious with your words." The songstresses and musicians chosen by His Highness the Prince of Qi are naturally of the finest quality. Zhao Qinan's expression stiffened. Qin Chu turned his head away indifferently. I thought for a moment and suddenly had an epiphany. Although Tan Chu and Zhao Qinan were in a political marriage, Tan Chu was determined to be a staunch supporter of Prince Qi in this lifetime, so naturally, he wouldn't indulge Zhao Qinan. Prince Qi laughed and said, "Now that my father dislikes me, what can I do? Even if I am a prince, a man who has lost power need not listen to refined music anymore. I actually find this folk music quite delightful." He waved his hand and said, "Summon the one who presented the dance music for questioning." Prince Qi looked at me and said, "It's rare to see someone dance with such earnestness. Would you be willing to join my household?" Qin Chu's hand, holding the cup, suddenly paused. He tightened his grip on the wine glass, instinctively about to speak, but he saw me kneeling on the ground, gently shaking my head, and taking the hand of Yi Jianhe beside me. "Your Highness, please forgive me." This humble woman already has a family and fears she cannot accept such fortune to serve your highness." The king of Qi, appearing unoffended and magnanimous, said, "Oh, if that's the case, then I shall help fulfill your wish." Qin Chu slowly let out a sigh of relief. It was only then that he realized his fingers, gripping the wine cup, had clenched so tightly they ached. What was wrong with him? He inwardly scoffed, thinking, "She's just a mere concubine, why act like an impulsive young man? So desperate." Could it be that he truly feared that once she entered the Prince of Qi's residence, he would never be able to take her back? Ridiculous. Qin Chu, gripping his sweaty palm, didn't realize he had let out a sigh of relief, but the next moment, I said, "But I am deeply grateful for your highness the Prince of Qi's favor. I have but one wish, that your highness permits me and my husband to enter the residence. In this life, we will serve only your highness with music and dance." Suddenly, some reckless young fool at the table accidentally knocked over a wine glass. I dared not pay attention to the commotion, focusing entirely on this moment that would determine our lifelong prosperity. Both Yi Jianhe and I came from humble origins and were not exceptionally clever. If we wished to climb the social ladder, we had to stake our entire being on this gamble, betting on the chance that a noble would take notice. I was so nervous I could hardly breathe. During the gathering, that reckless young man seemed to be muttering curses under his breath, apparently drenched by spilled wine, impatient yet forced to suppress his voice to the lowest out of deference to the King of Qi. Angry yet restrained, the King of Qi smiled and nodded. "Excellent. My residence happens to be short of musicians." The gavel fell, my heart raced, overwhelmed with excitement. The annoying noise during the banquet also vanished. As silent as death, I entered the Prince of Qi's residence. Finally, I had a place to rely on. Old acquaintances heard that we had latched onto a powerful patron, but that patron had already fallen from power, and their expressions varied. Some wore mocking smiles, while others watched coldly from the sidelines. A sister who was once close to me in the music hall quietly said to me, "Why did you choose the Prince of Qi? He's already been deposed. Once the new emperor ascends the throne, he'll be the prime target for punishment and exile. You'd have been better off going to the Pingyang Marquis's residence," she said. "You don't know this, but during the time you were away, the Pingyang Marquis specifically summoned everyone from the music hall and even selected Qingyu to enter his residence. Rumor has it that he even broke off his engagement with the Zhao family's young lady. Now Qingyu is quite pleased with herself, even thinking she might become the official wife." I didn't pay it much mind. I was just a bit surprised that Tan Chu broke off the engagement. He isn't the type to abandon power for the sake of beauty, in this lifetime. He would actually give up such a huge advantage. It really is a bit strange. But no matter what, it has nothing to do with me. Yi Jianhe was actually quite satisfied with the current situation. Now that the Prince of Qi had just been stripped of his position as crown prince and expelled from the palace, he wasn't even allowed to go to his fief. Instead, he was only permitted to move into the Prince of Qi's residence, since the move was rushed. The Prince of Qi's residence was short on servants and had plenty of empty rooms. Even minor figures like the two of us were assigned a whole side room to ourselves. Not to mention, the Prince of Qi led a simple life and disliked banquets. In the entire month, the residence only hosted guests twice, and we were only called upon to play music once. Easy work, good pay. Yi Jianhe, dressed in a brand new robe, couldn't help but sigh. A life like this, even if I were to die tomorrow, it would be worth it. Better days are yet to come. Little did he know that Prince Qi, who had endured hardships and feigned foolishness, was about to sow discord among the princes and be reinstated as the crown prince. These words were all spoken later. I had no idea that a storm was brewing at Qin Chu's place. "Are you insane? How dare you take it upon yourself to call off the marriage?" Qin's father, who had never involved himself in family affairs, was shouting in anger. Completely unable to understand why his usually wise and steady son would do something so foolish, Qin Chu said nothing. "Father, don't worry, I have my own plans. In less than 3 years, I will make the Pingyang Marquisate the most prominent noble family in the capital. Why should we rely on others' power? Absurd, to ruin a good opportunity now with empty promises 3 years from now. Qin Chu, when have you ever been so short-sighted?" Qin Chu rubbed his forehead, including his past life. It had been years since he had been scolded like this. He was no longer accustomed to flattery, to bowing his head, or even to wasting words on explanations. Short-sighted, he also wanted to ask himself, what exactly had happened to him? He had a perfectly good marriage proposal, yet he chose to focus his efforts on scheming for a mere concubine. No, she was no longer his concubine. Thinking of this, Qin Chu felt a deadly bitterness in his chest, so bitter that it made him retch and feel nauseated. She became another man's beautiful wife, then she entered the Prince of Qi's mansion, if the Prince of Qi, if he had other tastes, and one day, drunk and bleary-eyed, suddenly thought her dancing was exquisite. Tan Chu did not dare to think further. He took a deep breath. The scene in his mind shifted to one of peace and tranquility. He thought of his past life, on a day of howling wind and snow, with snow pellets pattering against the window paper. His xiaoman quietly held his neck, not saying a word. She did not seek jewels or jade, nor did she ask for his favor, nor for him to punish the women in the inner chambers who had framed her. She just held him tightly. Everywhere was warmth, everywhere was softness, making him feel as if he had fallen into a haven of comfort and tenderness. She lowered her head, earnestly, clumsily, and with great effort, imitating the postures from the fire avoidance illustrations, all just to please him. They lingered intimately until late at night. When he suddenly had urgent matters to attend to and had to throw on his robe and leave, she quickly straightened her clothes, only managing to slip on a thin silk skirt, and clutching a thick sable fur coat, she rushed after him. Snowflakes filled the sky, like scattered jade and shattered pearls. She was shivering from the cold, yet whispered softly, "My lord, don't catch a chill. Ren Yong caught a cold just a few days ago and still hasn't recovered." At that moment, he couldn't help but stroke her snow-dusted hair. Her efforts to please were so endearing. A selfless, unconditional desire to please. Isn't that the purest form of love in the world? She loved him, but after being reborn, Qin Chu never dared to ask himself that question. If she loved him, why had she always been avoiding him? Did Xiao Man truly love him? Think it over carefully. You are far too arrogant. With these final words, Father Qin turned and left in a huff. Qin Chu came back to his senses. While he had been brushing off the conversation earlier, his mind had wandered to other matters, and his thoughts grew increasingly chaotic. He summoned the steward. "Where is that songstress brought into the mansion the other day? Bring her here." The songstress entered with a graceful and delicate demeanor, moving slowly and elegantly. Tan Chu looked at that face. Indeed, it was stunningly beautiful. Yet he had absolutely no thoughts about it, a youthful appearance, but a heart full of ambition and self-interest. He had seen far too many people like this in official circles, in romantic affairs, everywhere, so many that it had long since made him weary. Qin Chu pressed his fingers heavily against his brow. He had never believed in the idea of a prodigal son's return, but time ages a person, and he had no choice but to admit defeat. In his past life, he was handsome, came from a good family, and had talent of his own. Naturally, he had lived recklessly in his youth. By the age of 40, Tan Chu had grown weary of his pursuits, and as his official career could advance no further, he began to pay more attention to his children. Tan Renyong was intelligent, filial, and resembled him in appearance, so naturally, he held a special fondness for him. When he turned 50, the Zhao family lost their power, and he decided to have Tan Renyong inherit the title. As a result, his interactions with Xiao Man became much more frequent. At 60, after Zhao Qinan passed away, he did not remarry. What was the point? Most of his life had been troubled by those who fought over status and succession. Fewer women in the household meant more peace and quiet. In his youth, he enjoyed endless romance and was fiercely sought after. But in old age, he came to believe that women were the root of all the clamor. Thus, the people in the rear residence either died or fell ill. Leaving it completely empty, with only Xiao Man remaining, he withdrew from court politics, devoting himself to raising birds, practicing calligraphy, and playing chess. Xiao Man stayed by his side all along, never making a fuss. More docile than the birds, she stayed with him until the day he died. Why did she abandon him in this lifetime? Tan Chu stared at the nervous songstress before him. He finally had to admit one thing. He didn't just want to bring back any random singer, he only wanted Xiao Man. Qin Chu closed his eyes. A heavy sense of helplessness left him with nowhere to hide. Helplessly, he realized that he truly liked her. It had nothing to do with her appearance, her identity as a singer, or Yongren. He was even more helpless to find that, even though she was already married, he still wanted to swallow the shame of being a man and snatch her away. Let the past be the past, and let the relationship with Yi Jianhe be over. She still had to spend the rest of her life with him. When he realized his true thoughts, Tan Chu found himself strangely relieved. The tension that had been twisted for days suddenly snapped, bringing an oddly liberating sense of breaking through to rebuild. Indeed, what was there to be ashamed of? This was the woman who would be with him for a lifetime. Why care about others' opinions now? Yes, she would spend the rest of her life with me. He repeated this phrase in his heart with great force. He waved his hand, instructing the butler to send the songstress back the way she came. Tan Chu stared at the suddenly empty room. If only, on that day at the banquet in the songhouse, when the brothel owner said she was gravely ill, he had insisted on taking her away. Tan Chu deeply regretted his actions. The emperor is gravely ill, factional strife is intensifying, the appointment of a crown prince is imminent. The Marquis of Pingyang paid a visit to the Prince of Qi's residence. The Prince of Qi said in surprise, "Qin Chu, at such a critical moment, how dare you still come to associate with a useless person like me?" Qin Chu immediately knelt down. "How could I dare, Your Highness? You speak too harshly." They exchanged a few pleasantries. Qin Chu felt a sudden unease, sensing that something was not quite right. His visit at this moment clearly indicated his intention to seek refuge with the Prince of Qi, now that the Prince of Qi's mansion was deserted and unwelcoming. The prince should have warmly welcomed such support. Why was he being so lukewarm? Suppressing his doubts, Qin Chu got straight to the point. "Coincidentally, I've recently taken an interest in music and have a new singer in my household. However, I feel her voice falls short compared to the ones in Your Highness's residence, so I came to seek your advice." King Qi laughed. "I see, so you have such refined tastes. Very well, summon those musicians." I saw Tan Chu and couldn't help but freeze. How did he become like this? His face was thin, as if he hadn't slept well for days, burdened with heavy thoughts, and his complexion looked terrible. His eyes were fixed on me, yet they shone as if tempered by fire. Has he gone mad, over the struggle for the throne? He's lost his mind to this extent. In his previous life, even when his wife fell ill and passed away, and he was so remorseful that he severed all emotions and began raising birds, he never went this mad. Tan Chu noticed me looking over and grinned at me, like a vengeful ghost. I couldn't help but feel a chill of fear, and the situation grew even more eerie. But fortunately, thinking of the preparations I had made in advance, my heart settled somewhat. Now, no matter how he seeks revenge, he ultimately cannot harm me. Good. As soon as the dance ended, Qin Chu applauded with enthusiasm. The King of Qi and Yi Jianhe both turned to look at him. Qin Chu smiled and said, "Such elegant music is truly rare. I humbly request Your Majesty's permission to exchange a few words with this songstress." The King of Qi, "Haha, I had no idea you had such refined tastes." I had no choice but to approach and sit sideways beside Tan Tsushi. When I got close, I could hear his excessively ragged breathing. I couldn't help but look up, only to meet those eyes that had also weathered the world. "Xiao Man," he whispered. I respectfully bowed and interrupted. "My lord, this humble woman, Su Man, is already betrothed. I beg you not to address me in such a manner." Qin Chu gritted his teeth, biting the soft flesh inside his cheek. The slight pain helped him suppress his jealousy toward Yi Jianhe. "Su Man, have you been well?" "I have, thank you for your concern, my lord." Trapped in a deep mansion, singing like a nightingale for a wealthy family. What's so great about that?" I frowned. Qin Chu pressed on relentlessly, lowering his voice as he drew closer. "In this lifetime, I'll give you the position of the principal wife. Grant you unparalleled glory, power, jewels, heirs. Yes, even the title of a noble consort. I'll give it all to you." A noble consort, so he did know what I cared about. Seeing that I still remained unmoved, he grew anxious. "Come with me." I shook my head gently. Tan Chu's face grew even paler. "Su Man, you never act this way. What's wrong this time? Don't be stubborn. Opportunities like this don't come twice." I said word by word, "I'm not leaving." "What did you say, Qin Chu?" "I don't want you. I never liked you." Since he could use the pretense of discussing music to corner me with no escape, then I too could take advantage of his fear of the Prince of Qi and his inability to get angry, and blurt out my true feelings completely. Saying it out loud, I truly felt so relieved. All the pent-up emotions, all the grievances, poured out like a raging flood. I smiled and said, "Who do you think you are? Just a worthless man. If it weren't for the noble title inherited from your ancestors or the support from your marital connections, what right do you have to step on me and toy with me like a mere tool?" Qin Chu suddenly froze. Unbelievable. It was as if I had spat right in his face. I felt even more satisfied. "Isn't it just Ren Yong that you want? Do you really think all his intelligence is solely because he's your blood?" Wrong. It was I who taught him to read and write, bit by bit. It was I who, barefoot in the heavy snow of deep winter, brought you a cloak and begged you to treat his illness. If it weren't for me, your proud son would have long since died from sickness. Qin Chu finally understood what I was trying to say. He clenched his fingers, his whole body trembling. as if suffering the greatest grievance of his life, so much so that his mind went blank and he was left speechless. I watched him coldly, finding it all rather amusing. Qin Chu, did you suddenly find that the bird you raised could speak human language and even started cursing at you, and you're not used to it, Su Man? Qin Chu couldn't take it anymore and instinctively grabbed my wrist. Stop talking. He took a deep breath. Enough, not even a little bit. I stared at him unrelentingly. Qin Chu's eyes were red at the corners, clearly on the verge of breaking down from anger. Don't say another word, don't push me. I sneered and pulled my hand away. Push him to do what? Qin Chu's pupils suddenly contracted, and he gave me a deep look. The heartbeat was as heavy and immense as stones crashing to the ground. His chest heaved as he suddenly turned his head. In an instant, he made a decision as resolute as life or death. He rose, knelt before the King of Qi, and bowed deeply. I beg your highness the Prince of Qi to bestow upon me the songstress Su Man from your household. This humble subject has but this one wish. I swear that from this day forward, I will follow your highness's lead and resolve any crisis you may face. Tan Chu got straight to the point, so impatient and reckless that he staked all his chips, yet only for an exceedingly trivial wager. This gamble seemed to have reached its conclusion, with victory and defeat already decided. In an instant, the entire hall fell into silence. The King of Qi sighed softly. Tan Chu, this won't do. Su Man is not just a songstress of this household, but also my advisor. The King of Qi still smiled, but a faint chill appeared in his eyes. Tan Chu suddenly looked up, staring at me and the King of Qi in disbelief. What? He blurted out. An advisor, said the Prince of Qi. I was wondering why you suddenly changed your ways and took a liking to music. As expected, you're still the same dashing and charming Master Qin I've always known. No, your highness, I am serious. But the situation, which had originally seemed firmly in his grasp, was slipping away from Qin Chu's control. Slowly turning against him, I stood up and bowed silently. Lord Qin. This humble woman is not only skilled in song and dance but also in divination and fortune-telling. Having accurately predicted a few minor matters, I was fortunate enough to earn His Highness Prince Qi's appreciation. Of course, they were not minor matters. They involved the third prince's plot to rebel and the witchcraft practiced by the 11th prince's birth mother. These were major cases that shocked the world in my past life. I bowed to Prince Qi. I am deeply grateful for your highness's great favor. The King of Qi nodded. Tan Chu's face changed dramatically. How could she divine? She is. We are all merely reborn. But how can this be proven? Compared to divination, rebirth seems more like a fool's wild fantasy. The King of Qi asked, what is it? Tan Chu stiffly pursed his lips and could only shake his head. His mind was in turmoil. He simply couldn't understand how, despite going all out and having victory within his grasp, things had ended up like this. The King of Qi said gently, all right, I know you've been fawned over by women since you were young, and it's rare for you to be so thoroughly rejected. It must be hard. How about this? Pick someone else, and I will certainly grant your wish. The Prince of Qi laughed again, shifting the topic. However, Lord Tan, please refrain from mentioning words like following my lead or resolving dangers on my behalf. The Prince of Qi spoke with profound understanding. Both thunder and dew are the grace of the sovereign. Since His Majesty has appointed me as the Prince of Qi, I am content to live as a leisurely noble. How could there be any talk of danger? By saying this, are you implying that I am dissatisfied with His Majesty's decree? Tan Chu's vision went dark. He knew that in his moment of haste, he had provoked the Prince of Qi's displeasure and ruined his own bright and smooth path in this lifetime. Qin Chu's face stiffened as he whispered, no. He let out a bitter laugh, no longer knowing how to explain. I looked at his expression and knew he had never expected me to make this move. In storybooks, there are also women who borrow corpses to return to life or travel back in time, but they either cleared up misunderstandings and reconciled, or abandoned their wicked husbands to seek better matches. So, Qin Chu thought my ideal husband was either Yi Jianhe or the Prince of Qi. He had no idea that the woman he saw as a bird that would come at his beck and call also had ambitions for power. He thought I was timid and honest, a perfect virtuous concubine. He thought I had never held an official position, never wielded power, and lacked the confidence to get involved in power struggles. But he was wrong. I've been bullied my whole life, endured it all along. I simply don't want to be anyone's wife or concubine anymore. Even a woman like Zhao Qinan, with her illustrious family background and a proper, lawful marriage, was confined to the inner chambers her whole life, fighting against the endless stream of women brought in. In the end, she fell ill and passed away. having exhausted a lifetime of energy. Yet she remained nothing more than the unnamed Mrs. Qin Zhao. I have endured a lifetime, and others praise me for having a good son, calling me a fortunate person. But no one ever asked if I wanted this so-called fortune. In my previous life, this fortune came only through fear and anxiety. Through bearing a son. In this life, I can earn it myself, so why should I remain a virtuous concubine? Why not be a lively person with desires? I advised the king of Qi and helped him ascend the throne. I know why he would rather have me than accept Tan Chu's help. After all, Tan Chu is a young marquis, and he is far more conspicuous than a singing girl in the inner chambers. He is too noticeable. If he frequently visited the Prince of Qi's residence, it would inevitably arouse suspicion. If the king of Qi had no other support, perhaps Tan Chu might have had a chance to contend, but with me here, he is of little use. On the day the king of Qi ascended the throne, he bestowed upon me a new mansion, Yi Jianhe, and I moved out to live in the grand residence, finally enjoying all the wealth and honor to the fullest. On a certain day in the depths of winter, heavy snow fell from the sky. The king of Qi, now the new emperor, summoned me for a discussion. As I stepped out of the mansion, Yi Jianhe hurried over and called out to me. He carefully draped a heavy cloak over my shoulders and said with a grin, "We can't let our lucky star catch a cold." I also smiled. Taking his hand as we walked to the carriage, amid the swirling snow, I suddenly felt a scorching gaze. I casually glanced back. It was Tan Chu. He has fallen on hard times. This is only natural. Without the protection of in-laws, others know that I, the emperor's favorite, am at odds with him. Even if I say nothing, they will treat Quan Chu differently. Just like Zhao Qinan, that day at the Prince of Qi's residence, his mockery of the singing girl turned, in the eyes of the crowd, into contempt for the Prince of Qi himself. With everyone impeaching him, the Prince of Qi naturally had no choice but to accept it. The Zhao family's days became much harder, however. If he had relied on his memories and experiences from his past life, Tan Chu wouldn't have fallen to such a state. It can only be said that he himself was like an old man who had lost his backbone and spirit. I don't know why, nor do I have any interest in finding out. Tan Chu was still looking at me. I stepped into the sedan chair, paying no further attention. The carriage moved away into the distance. With my eyes closed to rest, I heard a street vendor hawking newly released storybooks. The female strategist is greedy for wealth and lust, sharing the bodies of handsome young men and those in high positions. The servant, hearing this allusion to my scandalous affairs, couldn't help but turn pale with fear. Looking at me in terror, I smiled, shaking my head. A hand reaches out of the carriage window, touching the snowflakes falling upon the world. No matter, after handling the important matters and returning home, if the bookstore is still open, I might as well buy a new storybook to try something fresh. After all, this is the human world. If one crosses over the four-sided walls and steps into this human world, I found that joy, anger, and mockery all have their own charm. The end.